Alright guys, after decades of waiting, the time has finally come, Helltrack is frozen over, and RAD has got a digital release. The porch! I've told you a million times, the porch!
Have a nice day!
Alright guys, after months of waiting, the time has finally come. Let's cut it open. Particular. Oh yeah, some people were kind of complaining that their purple sides were getting a little nicked up. It looks like I've got a little bit too. It's a shame, not the end of the world, but this is a nice cover though. Cut the plastic off of this here. Same as the front. Oh look, there's a bunch of words. That's always good. Looks like Vinegar Syndrome has done a pretty good job with the packaging anyways. It looks like anything any other studio would put out. I'm not too familiar with Vinegar Syndrome's work. This is the first I ever heard of them. And luckily enough, I'm part of a 4K group on Facebook, and someone posted about this back in, I think it was March, and I went and pre-ordered it right away. So it's been a long wait now that we're, sitting here in July. Same artwork as the front, and on the Blu-ray you've got that purple. I really like the purple. I think it looks nice. And the sleeve is supposed to be reversible. Oh yeah, look at that. I'll probably just leave the blue side because it's the way it came, but who knows? Maybe I'll get a little crazy. Okay, put these things back in. All in all, pretty nice. Looks like they came with a movie poster here. I like the idea of movie posters, but I hate it when they have all these folds. I mean, how are you supposed to get that out? If you hang them on the wall or something, it's going to look silly. On the back side, yep, there's a map of Helltrack. Interesting idea by Earl Kess. Reminds me of something you'd see off of an old Where's Waldo book. Oh, there he is. That's not him. Anyhow, very nice production. Very happy to see the effort they put in all the packaging. I've been waiting for years for some sort of digital release of RAD, and we finally got something in 4K of all formats. Never would have dreamed that. I'd have been happy with just a DVD. Anyhow, I'm going to give this a watch, and I'll be right back with the review. Well, what a time to be alive. RAD gets a digital release, and the first time it's done is in 4K UHD with HDR. Who would have thought that day would have ever come? It's been such a long wait that I just never thought it was going to happen at all. First it gets overlooked for DVD, then by Blu-ray. 4K Blu-ray comes around and physical media is slowly dying off. Hopefully it doesn't. But out of nowhere, a small company like Vinegar Syndrome decides to get their hands on a 35mm copy of the movie and transfer it over to 4K. Thank you. Seriously. Not just from myself, but I'm sure from the whole cult following behind RAD. Everyone is very thankful for this release. Now, I went into this not expecting too much. The movie itself wasn't of the highest of budgets with the best of quality, so I wasn't expecting too much out of this release. But my fingers were crossed. But we'll get to that in a second. First, let's talk about the movie itself. How does a shitty little movie like RAD, about a sport at the time that nobody ever really heard of, get such a massive cult following over the years, and festivals, and friendships were formed, and all kinds of craziness online with like message forums and things of the like? How does that happen? When you have a movie that doesn't have much of a known cast at all, I mean, obviously Talia Shire is in this movie, but she's got a really small role. The rest of the cast, like Bill Allen, who is the main star, who plays Crew Jones, isn't really known for anything before this movie or even so much after this movie. I mean, he had a small little part in Breaking Bad not too long ago, but his career kind of fizzled off after RAD. Now, he did do some other work, obviously, just nothing large. And realistically, I don't know if that is just. He actually does a pretty damn good job in RAD, even though that it happens to be a cheesier movie. There are some scenes in this movie that he does, and he nails it pretty damn well. Now the, I guess, co-star of this flick would be his love interest, who is played by Aunt Becky from Full House. This was before she turned to her life of crime, Lori Loughlin. And her performance, I mean, was okay, I suppose. Nothing crazy, but she's not really ever known for having the greatest or largest of acting chops out there, but she had a decent career, mostly riding off the success of Full House. And then you've got some, I don't know, I guess you say questionable choices. You got Bart Connor, who plays Bart Taylor in the movie. Now, I'm assuming, I could be completely wrong, maybe this is a giant coincidence, but I would assume, being that Bart isn't the greatest of actors, they gave him the same name in the movie because he couldn't remember who he was. I don't know, that's just a guess. But what are the odds that Bart Connor becomes Bart Taylor? Now, he was a Olympic gymnast and a gold medalist, if I'm not mistaken, in 1984, if I'm remembering correctly. So he was kind of going off the success of that popularity to get into this role, and I guess he does an okay job. You can clearly see he doesn't really have any acting background there, but for what the role was, he did okay. Then you have his sidekicks, the off-brand Lou Diamond Phillips twins, Rex and Rod Reynolds, who have all the stereotypes of twins in this movie. Both of their names start with an R, and they're only 3 letters long, so they're very similar. They complete each other's sentences. They dress the same in wacky outfits, but as sidekicks to Bart, it works. I don't know if they've ever been in anything else after these movies. I've never seen them in anything else after these movies. But again, I'm guessing it's due to the caliber or the size of the scope of this movie. It all works. Now, the movie is directed by a stuntman named Hal Needham, who had a huge career in stunts over the years, and he went ahead and directed a few other movies like Smokey and the Bandit and Cannonball Run, and then RAD. The movie is obviously cheesy, but that's part of its charm. But what makes this movie good? It's not necessarily filmed the greatest, but the story does have a lot of heart, even if the story is fairly basic. It just has your classic underdog, hometown hero vibe to it that I think a lot of kids at the time who were following this up-and-coming sport of BMX, they were able to relate to it. I know I did. I didn't even have a BMX at the time. I was too young. I really loved this movie, and later on in life, I ended up getting into BMX. Now, obviously, I was no professional rider or anything like that. I just had one for fun, but a lot of that came from this movie. I remember me and my friends getting on our bikes and pretending we were riding Hell Track, and this was years later. Even whenever I got into a teenager and switched from BMX over to mountain biking, which I actually had a real passion for, I still related to RAD when it came to any time I was on a bike, BMX, mountain bike, doesn't matter. That thought was always in the back of my head. It put a thunder in my heart, if you will. Now, there are a couple things in this movie that are a little odd, I suppose, like the ass sliding scene out of nowhere. Apparently, one trip down the ass slide, you fall in love. That's how life works, according to this movie, because there's absolutely no connection, really, other than a gazing stare in the parade between Crew and Christian. But for whatever reason, as soon as they go ass sliding, sparks are in the air, and they seem to instantly be in love from that point on. Another scene involving those two was the bicycle boogie scene. Very strange scene, but it was a cool idea to see two people dancing with their bikes, essentially. Nothing like that has ever been done before, and I don't think it's ever been done since. Now, some of the writing in the movie was a little odd in my opinion, and if I'm going to get a little nitpicky, I'd say there's a couple things in the movie that I would rewrite if it was up to me. The fact that during the qualifying races, Crew has to cheat to win doesn't sit with me the greatest. Obviously, I overlook it because it's still a good scene, but I don't know, maybe they were trying to show the fact that this hometown kid has a slight advantage over these pros because he knows the area, he knows the track, and obviously exploits that by taking shortcuts to help him get second and third place so he can move on to the next round. I would have rathered personally for him to just race normally and earn his way through the qualifying races without having to take shortcuts or cheat, I suppose. Another thing that I find weird, obviously this movie is about Crew, but he does have friends in the movie that are into racing as well. Crew's best friend, Luke, was in the same race with him, just a few riders down, and yet gets no mention in the introduction. All the focus comes down to Crew. I get it, the movie's about him, but it would have been a little bit more realistic if they would have introduced the two hometown racers, and then maybe, emphasize Crew as he goes on to the next race and so on, and then call him the hometown hero instead of just excluding Luke altogether. But whatever, that's a small thing. The last little thing that I would change in the writing was, again, it's not so much cheating, it's just there's a scene at the very end when they're racing in Hell Track, and right at the last lap, Bart comes to a stop so that Crew can catch up to him and they can race head to head. I find that to be a little strange because that never would have happened in real life. Yes, I get it, he was trying to prove a point or whatnot, be noble or what have you, but I think it would have played off better if they would have caught up, or if Crew would have caught up to Bart naturally and then went head to head instead of Bart clearly throwing the race, if you think about it. Because if he would have just kept going, he would have won. But whatever. Again, that's me being nitpicky. The movie is obviously still really good. One of my favorites of all time, even to this day. I still watch it at least once a year. Now, mentioning that, I'll get into the whole video and audio quality side of this 4K release. First, we'll start with the video. Now this movie, not only does it get a bump in resolution from VHS quality up to 4K UHD, you're also getting HDR. And the HDR in this movie is pretty damn good. What you're going to notice at the most is in the nice deep skin tones and the brightness of a lot of the lights in this movie. Not just the lights, all the scenes and everything tend to get a bump in brightness. There is a video that I came across on YouTube just recently of, I don't remember who it was that did it. I'll link it in the description so you can see, but the guy does a comparison of the Blu-ray versus the 4K Blu-ray with like the whole wipe to show you the difference between HDR and non-HDR, and it's pretty impressive how bright the scenes, how much brighter and clearer the scenes come across with the HDR on. There are some scenes like whenever they're doing the bicycle boogie scene where there's like spotlights in the background, they're actually really bright. There was one or two that came up on the screen where it actually caused me to squint a little bit because the light came through so bright. Now obviously the picture is a lot sharper, a lot more crisp, and just looks phenomenal compared to what we had before. There is a few scenes that have a lot of grain, but going into a movie like this, it is expected. The movie didn't have the biggest budget, so I'm assuming they didn't use the highest quality of film, so you do get a little bit more grain from those transfers. I myself am not a big grain fan, but I can let it slide in some movies where you can't help it. I think what bothers me the most about grain is whenever that's added on purpose. Whenever they take a digital movie and add grain to it to kind of make it look like film. I find whenever they do that, it actually makes it just look noisy and it doesn't come across like a film look at all. I find it to be distracting, and I really wish they wouldn't do it. In some cases like this, or even some scenes in like a movie like The Shining, you still get some film grain, and well, you can't avoid it. Even Top Gun has a fair amount of film grain in some of the scenes. And that was a movie that was probably a higher budget with higher quality film, but it's unavoidable. The majority of this movie isn't super grainy, and the scenes that are really brightly lit are incredibly crisp and clear. Now with this new 4K transfer and bump in resolution, there was some things that I've noticed that I hadn't seen in this movie ever before, and I've seen this movie a good 30 or 40 times over the years and never noticed it. Now whenever I was watching this, I didn't start looking for things and trying to see what I didn't see before. These things just kind of happen organically. Right at the very beginning, after they do the BMX stunt intro there with all the pro riders, whenever the still frame comes up on the screen, in the background, as it's fading away, you can see a plane in the sky, which I never noticed before. Now I'm sure it was always there, but with the 4K transfer, it was so much more clear that it actually caught my eye, whereas I've never seen it before. Another big thing that I've noticed, there's a scene where they're driving down the road during that parade, and you got Bart and you've got the two Reynolds twins beside him. You can see this big scar on his shoulder and arm right here that I had never noticed before. Again, maybe others have seen it, but with the poor quality of before, it doesn't catch your eye. When he gets out of the truck and walks over to see Christian, when he turns around to come back, you can see it clear as day. This massive gash, like right here. It looks like he might have had surgery or something. Probably an injury from his gymnast career, I would assume. But pretty interesting to see how a good clean transfer can pull some of these details out. Another detail that I noticed that, maybe it was there, maybe I did see it in the past and don't remember, but it definitely wasn't as pronounced as it is now. Whenever crew is in the gym doing the bicycle boogie scene with Christian, he's wearing this white shirt that has, rhinestones on it or something. I never knew that before, never saw it. I noticed it on his leg, on his pants. He's got these black pants that have a stripe that go down the sides, and it looks like it has like rhinestones going down the stripes. I noticed that before, but I never noticed the sparkles on his shirt. And I have a feeling it's because the increase in brightness from the HDR probably is making those little shines stand out a lot more than they did in the past. So these small little subtle things that I'd never seen before, now with this 4K transfer, are a lot more noticeable. So based off the fact of how much growth from VHS to 4K there was, I'm going to give the video of this movie a solid 9 out of 10. Now for the audio on this disc, I didn't watch the Blu-ray, so I don't have a comparison from Blu-ray to the 4K, but if you compare, assuming was a stereo mix on the VHS to this new 5.1 track, it's pretty impressive. I haven't seen the VHS in years, so I don't have a direct comparison, but I can tell you from the couple times that I've watched this 4K disc, the new 5.1 track is pretty good. You got good separation from, your left, your right. Your dialogue is clearly coming out of the center channel like it's supposed to be. Is it reference quality material? Is there crazy amounts of bass or anything like that are going to shake your room? No, but this movie was never like that in the first place. One thing that I did notice that got an increase in quality was the sound effects. All the, the tires on the dirt and all that stuff. They sound a lot more crisp than I remember in the past. And then, of course, you've got the epic soundtrack that this movie has. Real Life's Send Me an Angel, for myself at least, and I'm sure for many other people, this was probably the first time they ever heard it. I know anytime I hear that song now, be it in another movie or some shitty re-release of the song, it always throws me back to RAD. I remember there was a scene in Teen Wolf 2 where Jason Bateman's character has a love scene and they play that song. During that whole scene, all I could think of was the Bicycle Boogie. So it clearly had a big impact on me in RAD. There were a few other songs in the movie that are iconic to RAD, and I don't think they were anywhere else. They were probably made for this movie, and that was Break the Ice, Thunder in Your Heart, and the third one was that love song. I don't remember what it's called, but it's used a couple times whenever Crew and Christian are doing their little bike romance scenes, I guess. They were all performed by John Farnham, which is somebody I've never heard of before, and I don't think I'm familiar with any of his other music, but I couldn't imagine any other songs being used in RAD other than these songs. They're perfect for the genre and they work out well. And one last thing I noticed in the audio of this movie, it made everything a little bit more clear, obviously, but one thing that jumped out was the fact that I, for the first time, found out that Crew's real name is Christopher. I don't know if this is common knowledge, but I've never noticed before that his name is actually Christopher. There's a scene fairly early in the movie where Crew wants to talk to his mom about signing up for Helltrack, and they get into an argument, and he says something along the lines of, "Oh, Dad would have understood," and she replies back, I don't remember the exact line, but she says something like, "Christopher, don't try that with me," or something like that. But she says his name Christopher. On my watch through of the 4K release, when she said that, I took a double take and I rewound the scene back a few seconds and listened to it again. And it is still a little muffled, but clear enough that you can tell that she was saying Christopher. So I rewound it one more time, raised the volume, and yeah, clear as day, she says Christopher. In the 30 years or whatever it's been since this movie's released, I have never once noticed that she called him Christopher before, probably based on the fact the VHS audio quality was just horrible. So the improvement from VHS over to this new digital release is a huge jump. So I'm going to give the audio a solid 8 out of 10. The last thing I'd like to point out are the special features. The special features on this disc, they're actually pretty good. I don't really watch a lot of special features anymore on any movies, barely ever. I used to watch them all the time. When DVD first came out, the first DVD I ever bought was Matrix, and I had never seen special features before. So I checked them out, and the special features on the Matrix are freaking awesome. They go into great detail and show you a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff. So I got addicted at the time, and any movie I bought, no matter what it was, I always watched the special features. Well, eventually over time, and my life got more busy, I usually would just watch the movie now, and very, very rarely would I watch any of the special features. Well, on the RAD disc, being the movie that it is, and I was curious about how they might have made the movie, and interviews and stuff I thought would be pretty interesting to watch, so I watched all the special features on this disc, aside from the audio commentary tracks. Audio commentary is fantastic. The only problem is it's long because you got to rewatch the movie. So I already watched the movie 3 times without the commentary. I didn't plan on watching it a few more times to listen to these commentary tracks Maybe one day I will, but overall the special features are pretty good on this disc. In my opinion, well worth the watch. Alright, so to wrap it up, the RAD 4K release from Vinegar Syndrome is a fantastic release, and for anyone that enjoyed this movie, even if you only enjoyed it a little bit, if you're into collecting 4K movies like me, this is something you need to put on your shelf. The amount of quality that went into this release is pretty impressive, and I'm going to be watching Vinegar Syndrome now with a close eye because I'm pretty impressed with what they were able to pull off with this. Now, the rest of the stuff that they have on their website, they're not really movies that I'm into, but I'll keep an eye out in case they put out more 4K releases similar to RAD, and hopefully they do. Imagine just how great it would be if they put something out like The Wizard or some other cheesy 80s movies that will probably never see a 4K release from the studio. It would be fantastic to see them put out more 4K releases. Alright guys, that about wraps up this review and unboxing of the 4K release from Vinegar Syndrome. Thanks a ton for watching. Hopefully you're still around. And don't forget to click the buttons and drop a comment. You know how YouTube works. Have a good one.